And we are live. Welcome to our latest podcast or stream of Cyclone. It is carrying over in Iran. We have the International Agency, the International Energy Agency, releasing 400 million barrels of oil. Just put that into perspective. This is to cope with the supply side shock, which the director of that agency reported as unprecedented in scale. And it really is. If you compare it to the amount of oil that was released after the special military operation was launched in Ukraine, that was 182 million barrels of oil. But now that the Hormuz Strait is on fire, we are seeing 400 million barrels of oil released to cope with the supply side shock. It kind of reminds me of Saddam Hussein when he incinerated the Kuwaiti oil fields when the Iraqi army was forced to retreat from Kuwait. It was a scorched earth policy, an apocalyptic blaze. If I can't have Kuwaiti oil, no one can. That was the thinking of Saddam Hussein. But this time, when you are filling up your car and you pass out when you look at the price indicator, know that it is our so-called natural allies, the United States and Israel, that unilaterally started this war with Iran and blocked the Hormuz Strait by assassinating the Ayatollah Khomeini with no clear objective, no clear goal on how to enact regime change. Reform started off as wanting to give this destructive, aggressive coalition this Axis their full support, the use of Britain's military bases, the use of Britain's resources. These patriots wanted to implicate Britain in this needless and wasteful war. But suddenly, they've changed their tune. Why is that? Could it be they realized that we have no military capacity to invest in this war? Could it be that there is an outside influence, perhaps in Restore Britain, the base on which reform will rely on to get into power if they want it? That will be discussed in the stream. Some of you may die. If some of you die, so be it. That is the message that Trump has given to American soldiers. But he seems to be giving it to staff on the oil tankers. He is urging oil tankers to pass through the Hormuz Strait, in spite of all the danger, in spite of all the risk, a complete disregard for the lives of the crew on those freight ships. Why? To cover up for his hubris, to cover up for his idiotic miscalculation. Even the Financial Times is getting cold feet reporting on the population's mood. The United States has made a chronic miscalculation when they decapitated the Iranian government by assassinating Ayatollah Khomeini. They assumed that it was all going to collapse, just as Hitler, when he launched Operation Barbarossa, Hitler assumed that just by kicking the door, the whole rotten structure of the Soviet Union would collapse. But once more, the aggressor has miscalculated. Not only is the United States nowhere near its goal of regime change in Iran, it's actually gotten even further. I can't tell you how many videos I've seen of dissidents of the Iranian government now stand side by side with loyalists in defense of their nation, in defense of their fatherland. The construction of a patriotic national front against US Zionist imperialism. This miscalculation completely glosses over the spirit of the Iranian people, the defiant resistance of the Shiites. How many people did you see out on the streets when the Ayatollah was murdered? But go back even before then. How many people Did you see when General Qasem Soleimani was murdered in 2020? You saw the streets fill up with hundreds of thousands of people. The Financial Times, the Western media, insist that these people were rounded up and forced onto the streets as if the Iranian government didn't already have its handful. But let's be realistic. When you look at the crowds of people who stand in defense of their government, you see hundreds of thousands of ayatollahs in waiting. So I don't know how the US plans to enact regime change. Are they going to parachute Reza Pahlavi, the so-called Shah in waiting? Well, I'd love to see that. I would love to see the United States drop that absolute scumbag in the middle of Tehran and see how the population deal with him. I would very much like to see that indeed. Trump insists that this war is going to come to an end. He insists it because his presidency depends on the swift conclusion of this war. But let me tell you, that will not happen. Either America will continue to dig its grave at its own peril and at the peril of the Zionist entity so-called Israel, or the US makes a humiliating withdrawal that jeopardizes the presidency of Donald Trump himself. He has lifted a stone only to drop it on his own feet. Now, scaling it back to our situation, our country, we see how our foreign policy implicates our civil rights at home. Of course, I am referring to the slashing of our jury, of our right to trial by jury, which we'll talk about at another time. Specifically tonight, I want us to talk about the banning of the Al-Quds March. What is Al-Quds? It is a march organized by a coalition of Muslim organizations. The people who attend it are families, Muslim families. The marches go on very peacefully. And the reason behind these marches is to stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine and the people across the Middle East, of the Muslim, particularly of the Muslim faith, who are on the front lines resisting imperialist aggression, resisting infringements on their sovereignty, resisting genocide. How come Shabana Mahmood, the one who used to wave the Palestine flag, who used to go on these human rights, anti-genocide, anti-apartheid marches, how come Shabana Mahmood, that they can't march on the streets of London, but the very people who hate people like you, who hate Muslims, who hate brown people, who hate anyone or anything that deviates from their warped idea of British, Tommy Robinson and his pisshead mates who march around, chuck beer bottles, get into scraps, piss on war memorials, monuments, buildings all over London. I can't wait to chop it up. Thank you very much for joining me. Let's roll the intro. Alrighty, guys. I feel like my monologues are getting better slowly but surely. I think that they're slowly being refined. Still have some pauses here and there, but work in progress. So let's start with it. How quickly is this war going to end? So I've posited two potential avenues. So on the one hand, the United States continues to fight this war against Iran, prolonging this economic crisis. And boy, it's an economic crisis, seeing how the International Energy Agency have responded to this. It's a bigger crisis than the war in Ukraine. And if you think about it, the war in Ukraine is much larger in scale than the bombardment of Iran. But it seems to me that the bombardment of Iran has actually more economic consequences, particularly because of its hold over oil supply into Western countries. Or will the US make the most intelligent option, in my opinion, which is to withdraw from this war, which will obviously result in the death of Donald Trump's presidency? Yeah. I mean, are these the only two options? I mean, how else do we see a way out of this?
I don't know if Sean has something he wants to say, but I think these are the only two options, the ones that you brought forth. I mean, they've already tried asking, from what we know, the Iranians for a ceasefire of some kind, and the Iranians this time have straight up, I believe 3 times now, rejected it. And I think they realize that this is a completely existential threat that they have to ward off once and for all. And I'm not saying this is going to result in the destruction of, Israel, or a complete weakening of the United States, even though it's, in its dying breaths as an empire. But at least it will ward off these two states for the time being, while Iran maybe decides that it wants to pursue the nuclear option, or can strengthen its military in some way or another.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the only option for the dying American empire, I mean, they're a toothless tiger now. Their only option is to get out of Iran. I mean, the human loss in Iran in the first 2 weeks has been devastating. We've seen 1,300 Iranians killed, 20,000 civilian buildings killed, most of those residential. The people of America just can't put up with this anymore. Economically, it's crippling. The only way for Trump to have any type of chance of saving this presidency of his is to get out, and to get out now. Iran aren't surrendering, despite basically begging for negotiations. Iran aren't playing ball, because despite what Western media will tell you, Iran aren't losing this war. America and the Zionist regime is getting truly a good hiding, really. I mean, it's something we see on Twitter. We see, the people we follow showing really what's happening. And it's not what we're being told, but it's the reality.
Absolutely. I think the Iranians aren't backing down, and why should they? Right? Just like Russia and Iran gave the imperialists, gave Washington several chances at a peaceful resolution. It was Iran that signed the the JCPOA deal, or the nuclear deal. Countries like Iran and Russia, against their better judgment, always pick the option of a peaceful resolution whenever the United States overstepped. But there was always that line that the United States overstepped too far. And once they've overstepped, that's when they want their pound of flesh. That's when Putin now wants to incorporate the Donbass as part of the Russian Federation. That is now why the Iranians will want to see their pound of flesh for this completely blatant act of war, this total invasion of their sovereignty, murdering not only their head of state, but what is the closest thing to a Shiite pope, right? The Ayatollah. That is like the significance the Ayatollah has. I mean, imagine how Catholics would respond if Trump bombed the Vatican and killed the Pope. That's what he effectively did in Iran. So the Iranians know that Trump lifted up a rock only to drop it on his foot. The Iranians know that the US and the Zionists are losing this war. And the Iranians are going to make damn well sure that they are punished for this. So it must be quite frightening being in the shoes of Trump and Netanyahu, for that matter.
Yeah, I have to say, I've been actually quite impressed by the Iranian response. I think for the last couple of events, where it was the 12-day war, for example, they've been quite reserved, and they sort of took the ceasefire when it was offered. And I was kind of half expecting them to be a bit more like Russia and China, in that they still seek, it's not like the Chinese are particularly, I don't know what the right word would be, but wolf-like, ruthless on the world stage. They uphold this UN charter and international law as if it's actually something meaningful. While Iran, I mean, I've been pretty impressed. It's actually responding and finding a way to make its, for lack of a better term, get its point across by actually using the military option and using it with determination. And the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is one of those things that they refused to do last time, but they are doing now.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. I mean, we've seen Iran be completely reserved. They're a peaceful people, and to them, this is something that now has been coming for a long time, where they've had their hands tied behind their back and being punched in the face repeatedly by not only just the rhetoric, but by direct actions and the targeting of schools and hospitals. This is something that the Iranian people are not going to put up with. And you can kill as many of their leaders as you want, but as people know, it's an honor for people to take up this position, to become a leader in this war. They'll happily be martyred and live an eternity with that and fighting this Zionist entity that is so ruthlessly attacking them.
Absolutely. I think it exposes the fundamental shortcoming of the US strategy of regime change. And we're seeing this as well in Venezuela. I mean, we've yet to see how the Bolivarian revolution is really going to respond to this attack by US imperialism. But Iran's response has been decisive. I personally I'm not as concerned with the Iranian revolution as I am with the Bolivarian revolution. I think the latter seems to be in greater peril than the Iranians. And even with the change of ayatollahs, as I mentioned in the previous stream, the Iranians have already prepared for this. They've already prepared the protocol to decentralize power to individual commanders of the army to make sure that the country is defended from imperialism. Now, Maduro also did that when he armed the civilian militias in Venezuela. So, I mean, are we going to? Do you think any of you think we're going to see boots on the ground in Iran?
I don't believe it will happen anytime soon. I think there are no boots to be put on the ground, at least in the vicinity of the region. So there has to be a large amount of troop movements, which I guess means that they have to be taken out of other places. Maybe Europe. Maybe the Europeans are going to start calling for an end to this war because they are afraid of losing U.S. military personnel. European leaders are often, with the war in Ukraine ongoing, calling, worrying about the loss of U.S. interest in Europe, the loss of U.S. support to Ukraine. Because if that finally happens, and with Trump, it's reduced. It's taken a sort of smaller emphasis on Ukraine. But if that happens, if it happens that the U.S. withdraws completely from the Ukraine front, then it's just up to the Europeans to sort of fight that on their own, and they are desperately worried about it. So I think, yes, the U.S. might decide to put troops on the ground, but it seems to me like they really have no real clear objectives. They don't really know what they're doing. Trump was hoping that this decapitation strike would, cause chaos, and he was hoping to have a quick end, a bit like, the kidnapping of Maduro to bring him back to Venezuela. So we'll see. I think it's to be seen. Trump can do anything.
Just reading the Financial Times, like, to hear it from the horse's mouth, quite literally, the Iranians are sticking with their government. Now, the Financial Times puts it quite pathetically. They say those who wanted to see regime change are now realizing it's going to come at the cost of the complete ruination of Iran. And I mean, to me, that was clear from the beginning. That is why you have the dissidents siding with pro-government rallies. The only Iranians who are cheerleading this complete slaughter are the Iranians residing in the West, the ones who aren't going to have their homes blown up, the ones who despise the country and the people that they left behind.
Yeah, you're right, Jesse. There's no Iranians in the country who are celebrating the bombing of schools, hospitals, and their neighbors. I mean, the ones that are celebrating are the ones in Miami, in the bordellos, who are picking up drugs, the ones that don't stand for what the people of Iran stand for. And those are the people that want boots on the ground. Those are the people that want continuous bombing of their country. And to be honest, I think even then, there's a very small percentage of people. I think they're allowed people. They're allowed people on social media. They're allowed on the Western mainstream media. But I think in reality, it's a very, very small percentage of people who are wearing Stars of David around their neck and probably didn't identify as Iranian until a couple of weeks ago.
Yes,
So,
and I just wanted to add to that real quick. This kind of popular front, like opposition, coming together to fight, the external threat. We see it everywhere. We saw it in Venezuela after Maduro got kidnapped. The streets were full of both Chavista party members or supporters, and you had actual Venezuelan opposition, which isn't the kind of opposition that is financed by the United States and sort of dropped from the heavens onto the country. It's actual genuine opposition that exists in Venezuela. And so you see this both in Iran and Venezuela, that even though the goal of the imperialists is hopefully cause enough instability to cause an uprising, the opposite happens. You get a much wider coalition of people who are willing to defend their homeland from a threat that they perceive as much greater than whatever political disagreements they may have internally.
Absolutely. I mean, they see who really is the enemy of Iran, and it's the people who brandish the Star of David. You see these Iranians out on the streets alongside the Zionists, and they're completely blind to just how much the Zionists hate them. It's a deep racial hatred that the Zionists have. Zionism is a cult. It's an anti-human, murderous, bloodthirsty cult. And you see that when the Zionists bomb Palestinians, not just Muslim Palestinians, but Christian Palestinians. And you could bet your bottom dollar that if there were Zoroastrian Palestinians, the Israelis would bomb them too, right? That's the blood cult that they have tainted themselves with. So, and the people who actually reside in Iran are totally against this. So I agree. I don't know how the US could possibly hope to establish any occupation of any sort in Iran. You have hundreds of millions of Shiites willing to die for their country. How on earth do you establish any infrastructure to occupy that country? I mean, what are we going to send? How are we going to contribute? You had Nigel Farage, who just a week ago was cheerleading this. Yeah. Now getting cold feet, being grilled by the BBC, and you could feel the pain in his face, the irritation. I mean, this man is getting worn down big time, saying all we have are two destroyers. That's our naval force that we could possibly it's already occupied. So we'd have to take that from its current operations into the Strait of Hormuz to give naval support to the American conquest in Iran. Like it's complete fantasy. So Reform now are picking up the exact rhetoric now given out by Restore Britain and Rupert Lowe. They are, Rupert Lowe, I mean, I'm opposed to his politics, but at least their patriotism is consistent. Keep Britain out of this completely destructive and wasteful war. Whereas earlier, Reform, these so-called patriots, were championing sacrificing British lives, British resources at the behest of Washington and Tel Aviv. I mean, what's made that U-turn, do you think?
I think politically this war's been a disaster for the West. I think boots on the ground, the threat of that is just a devastating, possibility for everyone. No one in America wants to see their soldiers coming back draped in the American flag, but they died for an Israeli flag. And in Britain, Labour's already dead. Keir Starmer, as a prime minister, is just waiting to be finished now, and it's just a complete disaster for them. I mean, like, who trusts Keir Starmer's ability to make the nuance between a defensive war and an offensive war? Who can trust him in that? And frankly, who cares about that nuance? Because to the vast majority of the UK public, American planes being loaded with missiles and B-1 bombers landing in our air bases, to them, the thought of that's disgusting. Seeing that on the news is disgusting. So to them, it doesn't matter that nuance, but we can't trust him in that anyway.
Well, it's weird though, because like the establishment has changed its mind several times where you look at Labour or Reform. So, you have Starmer saying, I want to make it abundantly clear that we will never allow RAF military bases to be used by the United States and Israel. And all of a sudden, we will send our planes over there, but it will be just for defensive purposes. And we're seeing that with that same change with Farage, except it's gone the other way around. So Labour started off being able to say no to the United States, and now they've supplicated. Reform have started out as being loyal to the United States, and now they're saying we need to dig our heels in and say no. I mean, what's going on here?
I think.
Well, mate,
oh, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. But I was just going to add a simple thing: is Nigel Farage's stance is actually, if you think about it, has only changed since he was snubbed from a Mar-a-Lago meeting with Trump. I mean, to me, that's not a coincidence either. I mean, we're talking about shallow leaders. I think Nigel Farage, if he had got that meeting and had the whole facade with Trump, to have his little, press conference and to have all the pictures taken so he looks like Trump's golden boy in the UK, I think maybe he still would be for this war. But with Rupert Lowe opposing it, and for a lot of Reform voters who clearly, along with the left, are against this war, because to them, not only are they worried about domestic issues, they don't want a potentiality for there to be an influx of asylum seekers from Iran. It's quite simple to them. And I think Nigel Farage has now had to take that stance.
I think in addition to them being completely shallow and sort of devoid of any substance, they're also incredibly opportunistic. They have, what I've seen recently is that Reform has stalled in the polls. They're not going up. And if anything, they're decreasing by a few points, probably because of Restore. And they see that and they say, oh shit, something's got to be done about this. And they back a popular position, And one more thing, I think, is that, you said, I think it was Jesse that said that the Labour's gone from one point of view to the other and Reform did the opposite thing. It's almost like they're now the two, because Labour is in government and Reform is like the main opposition to, anyone that's paying attention. They're kind of filling in for each other in a way. So Labour's the party in government that, if they They take one position, and which reform has to come in and fill the other to provide the facade of like some kind of the system working, when in reality they're all on the same side of things. So I think it's just an effect of the kind of political system that we have in Britain, which is completely broken.
Well, it's interesting to see this this contradiction now grow between Nigel and Trump. I mean, it's quite interesting to see that it is just Salo. I mean, Nigel Farage, did he just rock up and then Trump said, "Hey, sorry, Nige, for all this stuff with the Epstein files, we can't have you in. It's just a bit too messy, just very messy, very busy with Iran. So you just go focus on building what you can in Britain, and we just need to focus on what we got going on here." I mean, why would Trump snub Nigel?
Well, they claim it's travel plans, but maybe Trump is actually, I mean, he is an idiot, end of the day. And maybe someone, an advisor of his, has put a document on his desk and said, you know, this Nigel Farage guy, he's only got X amount of MPs and he's only been lost this many elections. Maybe Trump is finally coming to realize that Nigel Farage is not the leader that maybe believed he was before. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, Elon Musk was even muscled in on this. I mean, Musk ended up backing Rupert Lowe at the expense of Farage. So I think it would make perfect sense that Trump was kowtowing this king-making decision of Elon Musk. It shows you who is the brain behind the operation and just how influential Elon Musk is. Cool. Well, I think if we're happy to turn the page on that, let's now scale this over to Britain. So we've got our right to trial by jury in jeopardy. Ostensibly, this is down to a backlog in cases, of which I have no doubt there is. Austerity couldn't have no effect on our judicial system. But I think it has more to do with the Palestine Action and to defend our juries campaign. I think this is a government fighting back against them. We now have Shabana Mahmood trying to get an appeal in the British Supreme Court to allow the continued prescription of Palestine Action. And we have Shabana Mahmood also, this woman who previously went on Palestine solidarity marches, ban the Al-Quds March. Now, just for the sake of fairness, she's allowing the a static demonstration. But just how far is this an actual concession? I personally don't think we should underestimate the fact that she is banning this as a march, especially when Shabana Mahmood allows Tommy Robinson and his pissed up mates who piss everywhere and who hate Shabana Mahmood. Why are they allowed to march?
I think a lot of it has to do with what each side actually is in a material sense. You've got Tommy Robinson's fake opposition, which claim to be sort of anti-establishment force, when in the end all they do is channel everyone back into reform. And reform is not exactly an anti-establishment force by any means. So on the one hand, you have an opposition that is completely sort of meaningless. It's just to get some anger out. And the other is the Palestine issue, which has actually caused a lot of trouble for the government. You have, for example, George Galloway's victory in Rochdale a couple of years back, or you have the million and plus, I think that's what the numbers were, in marches in London, 1 million more people in London. So you have a sort of national force forming that can actually be a threat if they start organizing workers, if they start saying we need to, do a mass strike, or we need to stop, the people that are exporting F-35 parts for Israel. We're going to go on strike and make sure those parts are never leaving the country. So that is actually a force that can be dangerous, and that's why the government is cracking down on it much more fiercely than Tommy Robinson and his mates.
I mean,
yeah, I think for the people in support of Palestine and our ongoing solidarity to the movement, I think the banning of the march is actually quite something we should be proud of. I mean, it's really getting to the government and Shabana Mahmood that she's had to go to this extent to do this in a week where, after the jury being scrapped, it's so bad for them that it shows that, where we are. I mean, if they, because obviously this week it was going to be due to Iran, it was going to be about Palestine and Iran. And if they are so worried about a visceral reaction in a march that for the last 40 years has been so peaceful, and no one expects any differently, but if they do expect such a visceral reaction, then maybe it's a stance that the government should be thinking closer about taking.
I think you're both absolutely right. I think it is very dangerous, much more dangerous, to have a big march in solidarity with the people of Palestine and also Iran, who are on the front lines against imperialism. And not only that, but have the two demographics that our establishment are trying to pit against each other through these Unite the Kingdom rallies led by Tommy Robinson. You have the Muslim working class and the white working class. And imagine, and we are getting more white people, we are seeing more white faces on these Palestine marches. A lot of people would dismiss this as, oh, well, they're just middle class intellectuals. But isn't that great, though? Isn't it great that we have a demographic as backward as the white middle class intellectuals coming out in force for a campaign that's fundamentally progressive, rather than they're just weird lefty liberal fantasy? They're actually coming out for something meaningful. And so what if they got purple hair? It actually doesn't matter. I've made this point. Going back to Iran, I'm very happy to work with Rupert Lowe, if such an opportunity will ever exist, to stop Britain's bombardment of Iran, so long as we have that clearly defined objective. And I would love it to see both, your classic skinhead at the pub march alongside the purple-haired feminist in opposition to war, in opposition to genocide, and in solidarity to the people on the front line of imperialism to the Middle East. And that is the opportunity that we see in the Al-Quds March. And what we need to show to people is that by standing with people abroad, you stand for your own rights here at home, because you cannot sever that link. There is no Chinese wall. We see how our foreign policy is impacting our domestic situation here. We are seeing our right to a jury slashed because of the government's prerogative in the Middle East.
I think this very nicely brings us back to the idea of the sort of popular front, in a way, in the electoral coalition, even, where you can actually build a broad front to challenge both Labour and Reform, with the Workers' Party and the Greens wherever they're strong, and if they ever amount to anything, then your party as well. I think it's a nice way of bringing all these, even though very different forces on most things, together along the one issue, so that an actual meaningful, impactful effect can be felt. Yeah.
Our belly isn't big enough to digest a whole elephant. And that's what we're dealing with, right? We need to eat a whole elephant. And if we can't eat the whole elephant by ourselves, we need other people to help eat this elephant with us. We may have had a scrap with the very people that we're trying to bring in on this, but we may disagree with a whole lot of their worldview. But at this stage in time, I agree, we'd absolutely need a united front. In the first case, we need to sever the ties between the Labour Party and the trade unions. We need to stop the rise of Reform, who will, I guarantee you, in power, they will absolutely be ever more subservient to the United States and Israel than we've ever seen our government be. And that, as you can imagine, is very much saying something. I've said all I've needed to say. I don't know if either of you two guys have anything more to add on this.
All I'd say is that if the government want to ban the march, there's still going to be tons of people. There's still going to be a massive turnout that come. And if she wants to arrest everyone, then she's going to have to bring a lot of vans. That's all I would say.
Absolutely. So if you're out there, if you're in the UK, or even if you're not, and you fancy taking a trip to the UK, Sami, you're only in the Netherlands, so there's no excuse for you. But get yourself to the Al-Quds March. Sean's absolutely right. The way we beat the ban is through mass participation and eventually mass civil disobedience, as that is the only way we can break these repressive laws that are imposed on us by an elite that do not have our interests at heart, by an elite who are complicit in genocide and war. But we will win. And with that, guys, I will bid you all good night. And thank you to our audience. Thank you to Sean. I forgot to introduce him at the start. I'm my deepest apologies. But Sean is a founding comrade of mine in the Workers' Party of Britain. He is the grandson of, well, I don't really need to say that, do I really? But yeah, as ever, I hope we see Sean on more of our shows. And I hope we see you at more of ours. We'll be looking at opening up our space a little bit later. I think we didn't really have the technological or time capacity to get it all figured out, but we are going to start inviting audience participation through the X space, I believe, or through the StreamYard. We're still figuring that out. But thanks for tuning in, guys, and Godspeed.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.